Want to speed up your language learning? Get access to all of our best PDF cheat sheets for free. Just click the link in the description and sign up for your free lifetime account right now. Hi everybody, welcome back to Ask Alisha, the weekly series where you ask me questions and I answer them. Maybe. Let's get to your first question this week. First question this week comes from Kitty Pong. Hi Kitty Pong, I hope I said your name correctly. Kitty Pong says, "Hi Alisha, how do I use the words finally and eventually in sentences? Thanks." Okay, sure, let's talk about the words finally and eventually. First, let's talk about the word finally. So this word means the end of a time period. So for example, we use this word a lot when we have been waiting for something for a really long time. So for example, if you go to a cafe to meet your friend and you wait for an hour, you might describe that situation with the word finally in a sentence like this. I went to the cafe to meet my friend. After an hour, he finally arrived. So this finally comes before the verb arrived, which tells us the action that happened after the waiting period. So we use the word finally before that action or that thing that ends the long period of waiting. We can use this for other long periods of time as well. So for example, I was looking for over a year and then I finally found the house that I wanted to buy. So in this situation, again, we have something that takes a long time to do, and then we have finally found that's used to describe that last action that's taken. So we use finally to express this idea of something that took a long time finishing. If you want a good hint, you can remember that the word final, which refers to the end of something, is inside the word finally. Another thing to keep in mind with the word finally is that it often expresses a feeling of relief. So that means this thing that took a long time is over, it's done, we reached the end, and we feel relieved. So for example, after waiting for 1 hour, my friend finally arrived, I feel relieved, right? I don't have to wait anymore. And in the second example sentence, looking for a new home, we feel relief. We're like, it's done, finally. So we can express this sense of relief with finally. Okay, so there's one other use of finally that I want to talk about in this video, and that's to use finally to express the last step in a series. So the easiest way to understand this use of finally is in something like a recipe. So when you get to step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and the last step, you'll often see that with finally at the beginning of the step. So for example, if you're making a salad and it says chop the onion, step 1, and step 2 is to mix the dressing, and step 3 is to put these other ingredients in, whatever. Maybe step 4, the last step, is something like finally mix and serve. So finally there shows this is the final step in something. So we can use finally to show that it's the last action in a series. So you will also see finally used in this way. This use of finally doesn't really communicate that sense of relief. Rather, this use just shows us this is the last step. So this is kind of like a hint word. You've reached the last item in this situation. So these are the two uses of finally I want to talk about. Let's compare this to eventually. So we use eventually to mean kind of in the end or after a period of time. And we can use this to talk about the past. We can also use this to talk about the future. So let's take an example situation. Let's say, for example, you're really, really good at school and your friend wants to comment on that and give you some opinions about your future. Your friend might say something like, "You're so smart. I'm sure you'll get a scholarship eventually." So in this situation, the person is giving a compliment, "You're so smart," and then "I'm sure you'll get a scholarship eventually." So a scholarship means money to attend college or to attend university. And then they finish with eventually. So this eventually means at some point in the future. We don't specify when in this sentence. The speaker just wants to say at some point in the future. So you might think, okay, so what's the difference between something like sometime or someday in this situation? Couldn't I say, "I'm sure you'll get a scholarship someday," or "I'm sure you'll get a scholarship sometime"? Yeah, you could, but eventually, the word eventually, in addition to talking about something we think will happen in the future or over time, eventually sounds like something that happens gradually, step by step. So in this situation, when the speaker says, "You're so smart, I'm sure you'll get a scholarship eventually," it sounds like through hard work, probably, or through demonstrating that you're very smart or you're very talented, you will receive a scholarship. The speaker thinks so. So eventually communicates this idea of something happening gradually, step by step. So we can do this to talk about the future. We can also talk about past situations, things that were resolved. So let's take a look at that as our next example. Let's say, for example, you were really sick, or you know somebody who was really sick last year. You might say, for example, oh, she was really, really sick last summer, but she eventually got better with lots and lots of good food. So in this situation, she eventually got better, again, sounds like it took some time, or it happened over a time period, and eventually communicates this idea of gradually, step by step improving. So this is what we use eventually to communicate, something that happens gradually over time. Remember, we use finally to talk about the end of a period, and we often use it to communicate relief that that thing is now finished. So I hope this answers your question about the differences between finally and eventually. Thanks very much for sending this question along. Okay, let's move on to your next question. Next question comes from Andrea. Hi, Andrea. Andrea says, hi, Alisha. Can you explain when I should use beyond and behind? For example, may I drive my car beyond the house, or may I drive my car behind the house? Thanks a lot. Yeah, great question. So beyond and behind both create grammatically correct sentences here, but they communicate two different ideas. So let's take a look at how we are communicating different things with these two simple word choices. So let's take an object and imagine our car in this example situation. So when we say, I moved the car, or I drove the car behind the house, it sounds like the position of the car here is the opposite of the front, right? So I drove the car behind the house, or may I drive the car behind the house? It sounds like it is not in front of the house, it's the opposite side. So that means here, right here. So driving the car behind the house is here. On the other hand, when we use the word beyond, it means to come up to something, to approach something, in this case driving, to reach that thing and to continue past it. So may I drive the car beyond the house is saying, can I come up to the house and reach the house and then continue past the house? So when we say drive the car behind the house, it sounds like this position. And when we say drive the car beyond the house, it sounds like continuing. So that's what we're communicating here, the difference between a location that is the opposite of the front and continuing past something. So in addition to these ideas, it's important to note that beyond is not used that much in everyday conversation to refer to this kind of passing and continuing on action. We use the word past a lot. So for example, we would say in your example sentence, may I drive the car past the house, P-A-S-T, past the house. So beyond tends to be used a little bit more formally, and we also have some uses in idioms and other expressions where you might hear beyond used. We can also use beyond to talk about time as well. So for example, when you have maybe a meeting and you use too much time in the meeting, you might say we went beyond the meeting time. So that means we continued, we reached the meeting time and continued our meeting. So beyond has some uses other than the ones that we're talking about in this lesson, but this is the difference in terms of beyond and behind. So if you want to communicate this idea, if you want to use a more natural word for everyday communication, I would recommend using past, P-A-S-T. May I drive the car past the house? This communicates the idea of reaching something and continuing to go even after you reach the destination or you reach this key point. So I would recommend that choice. But I hope that this answer helps you understand the differences between behind and beyond and also past. So thanks very much for sending it along. Okay, let's move on to your next question. Next question comes from Renat. Hi, Renat. Renat says, hi, Alisha. I have a question. What is the difference between too much and so much? Thanks for your lessons. Okay, let's refresh our minds on the differences between too and so, with too much and so much as our focus points. When we have too much of something, it sounds like a negative. For example, I ate too much junk food yesterday and now I feel terrible. Or he got too much sunlight at the beach and now his skin is red. So this sounds like it's a bad thing. Too much of something is generally not considered good. If someone says something like, I have too much money, they're probably making a joke. On the other hand, so much is generally considered a good thing. We use it as an emphasis. Like, for example, I love ice cream so much. You can use it in the same way as you would use the word very, as in, I love ice cream very much. Another example with so much might be something like, this food was so much fun to make. So we can use it with a verb as well. This food was very fun to make. We can use the same very trick to confirm that this is correct. So when we use so much, we tend to use it a lot to talk about good things with lots and lots of emphasis, but there are some cases where you may hear people using it for a negative emphasis as well, like, oh, I hate that so much. But the key here with so much is that it's being used for emphasis. And while we tend to use it a lot to express happy things, you may hear it used in negative sentences too. But to recap, too much is used in a negative sense, that there is more than we need and it's a bad thing. So this is a very, very quick review of the concepts of to and so. If you want some more information, there is a whiteboard video on the channel about how to use these. In addition to too much and so much, I also covered too many and so many there too. So check that out. I hope that it answers any and all questions you might have about this grammar point. So I hope that that helps you. Thanks very much for sending this along. All right, that is everything that I have for this week. Thank you, as always, for sending your great questions. Remember, you can send them to me at EnglishClass101.com/ask-Alisha. There is also a link in the YouTube description where you can send me your questions on the official question submission page. Please make sure to send your questions to that page. Don't put them in a YouTube comment or Facebook comment or Instagram message or I don't even know where. Please make sure to send them to the official question submission page where I will 100% for sure read your question. If you send it somewhere else, I will probably not. There are too many. So please send it to the official question submission page. If you enjoyed this lesson, also please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Also check us out at EnglishClass101.com for some other things that can help you with your English studies. Thanks very much for watching this week's episode of Ask Alisha, and I will see you again next time. Bye!